Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg in Washington this week arguing for Libra, the digital currency his company created and wants to build around. This after he last week made the case in front of an audience at Georgetown University that Facebook's future, its past, its reason for being are all tied up in free speech. Welcome to Fort Knox, rich ideas and powerful people. I am John Fort from CNBC here at the NASDAQ market site overlooking Times Square. With me this week for another bite out of this Facebook and free speech debate, John Stanton, the co-founder of the Save Journalism Project, formerly of BuzzFeed, and Farhad Manjoo, columnist for the New York Times. I'm in the odd position today. I mean, both you guys are tough on Zuckerberg and Facebook, so I'm going to have to argue maybe to an extent beyond what I naturally would be inclined to. I'm going to have to argue for Mark Zuckerberg or at least put forth arguments from that perspective. John, why in your mind is Mark Zuckerberg not right about the free speech declarations, assertions he was making at Georgetown a few days ago?
Well, I mean, the basic history is just, it's a lie. The Facebook started as a way for him and his friends to rate the relative hotness of the women on the campus at Harvard. There's documentation of that. It's what they said it was at the time. So the idea that there was this way for people to protest against the Iraq War is just revisionist history.
Agreed. Totally agree. But what he said wasn't exactly, I created it as this Iraq War protest tool. He did sort of say, well, this was going on at the time, and over time, I saw that maybe networks, products like this could be used to give people a voice. He made it sound sort of like an origin story, but he didn't come right out and say, this is why I started Facebook.
No, but I mean, the reality is look, the idea that Mark Zuckerberg is in this for anything other than to make money is belied by many of the actions that they've taken over the years. I mean, just the simple fact that Facebook knew what was going on in Myanmar with the Rohingya and knew that genocide was occurring and that their platform was being used to orchestrate the murder of thousands of people and did nothing about it, because they were making money. That is a clear example of what they're in this for. And the idea that Mark Zuckerberg is somehow has some moral, thing at stake here is just kind of crazy.
Farhad, you agree? You think Facebook's really focused on the money here? You don't think Zuckerberg at least thinks he has a moral compass guiding some of his decision making?
Well, I'll say this. I mean, I think it's good that he is sort of making the case in public for what he wants to do versus, someone like Larry Page who runs Google, who has just kind of disappeared from public view. I think it's good. It's better that he's out there and making the case. I just find his case very muddled. I wasn't really sure what he was saying in the speech last week because he on the one hand, there was sort of this headline declaration that he was for free expression. On the other hand, it was like full of these different caveats for where they will police speech. And like those seem to run against his kind of headline declaration that they're all for free expression. So,
well here's what I think. I think he was saying, and correct me, Farhad, if you think that I'm making a different case that he made, is that overall he's in favor of free expression, free speech by default in cases where that speech threatens to hurt a group in real life, or it bleeds over into areas like child pornography, things that they're absolutely for stopping that. But in general, they tend to be in favor of free expression. And then when it comes to political ads, he was saying we're going to let politicians, political figures put messages out there without us, a corporation, filtering whether they're true or not, which, by the way, 5 years ago in Ohio, a judge ruled needs to be, in essence, the law of the land. You can't make laws requiring the filtering of political speech because you don't want to put government in that position. And so one could argue, if government's not going to be in that position, why should we make Facebook filter political speech?
I mean, but Facebook filters speech all the time. Like it doesn't allow nudity on its platform. It doesn't allow on Instagram it allows male nipples but not female nipples. Like it has various kinds of rules based on like their business interests, which are like perfectly in line with the First Amendment, with other things that they, other sort of philosophies that they have, and they've just made a decision that they're not going to kind of stringently police political ads here. But they have over the last last few years, like done more on fact checking and misinformation, and done, aligned with fact check groups. So it's not even like the case that they're, all for free expression, whatever anyone says. They like have loads and loads of various ways to police what you say, to limit the distribution of it. Like, so they have all these moderators who flag content, or users flag content. The moderators review it. They can like limit how it spreads on the platform. I feel like the thing he was sketching out was a very kind of simplistic view of what happens on Facebook. And in fact, like the whole thing is just, there's a lot of nuance to what they do, and the nuance is sometimes based on like political philosophies that Mark Zuckerberg has. But I would imagine a lot of times it's based on like business interests of Facebook, and like whether this works for their brand, their platform, and whether it doesn't. I mean, that's like how Instagram works, for example. Like it's a brand that favors certain kinds of images and speech, and like other things you can't do on it. And that's like everyone's fine with that. I just feel like it's
the algorithm is a big part of what he didn't address. What you're allowed to say versus what they're actually going to let more than a couple people hear. Two totally different things. So, John, what's the answer here? I mean, we ban Facebook. We force them to make the algorithm transparent so people can alter what they see in their feed. What's the change?
I mean, look, I don't think banning Facebook is necessary. I think Facebook has done a lot, been a helpful tool to people in their lives. I don't think it's crazy to think that we can have sort of the two things at once in our brains, right? That there are some good things to it, and there are also some very problematic things. I think, one thing is if Facebook is not going to take a real, sincere approach to dealing with these issues, which it seems from what he's been saying that it doesn't seem like they really want to, then pressure needs to be put on them by the government, by the public, to step up and deal with these things. I also think that the government needs to seriously start looking at antitrust issues with the company. They become so large that they've essentially taken control of the public square in a lot of ways, which is really unheard of in our history. Never before has one or two companies been able to dominate the public debate the way that they and Google can. And I think it's very, very dangerous, and it's something that we have not, as a country, really started to reckon with yet.
Yeah, fair. Facebook and YouTube in particular, I would say, are two big ones in influencing the public debate. So let's talk Libra and Calibra, because that's a lot of what Zuckerberg was on the Hill talking about this week. Farhad, these are two different things. Libra is this currency idea that Facebook came out with. They put out a white paper. They've created this Libra association offshore to regulate this currency, and people are going to be able to build around it. There's a board of 5 to 19 people in the Libra Association, starting off with 21 different members, but trying to grow from here, each with one vote. Facebook says we will not control Libra, the currency. The dollar, the U.S. dollar, will be a big component of it, but there will be a basket of currencies involved. Calibra is Facebook's wallet that it plans to wrap around Libra, to contain Libra. So Calibra is the wallet, Libra is the currency. Calibra belongs to Facebook, Libra doesn't. Farhad, what's the danger here with Libra? Why not just regulate it? Why not just say, hey, we don't like this or that detail about how the Libra Association wants to do this. If you move forward, it has to be pegged to specific currencies, and then let the digital funds flow.
Yeah, I mean, we've run into this problem several times with Facebook and with Google, with tech platforms in general, which is that before they launch the thing, nobody quite knows like what its role is going to be in society, and obviously it could be a failure. Like, Google and Facebook have released tons of products that just went nowhere. So you could say that we could do that again, right? Like, we don't really know what's going to happen. Why not just let it run and see what happens? But I think that it's particularly for something as important as like money, as like something that the government usually has a role in regulating. It's pretty important to ask tough questions of the company that wants to create a new way of trade, of commerce, and even if it sort of goes nowhere or has few negative side effects in the future, like asking the questions now and kind of gaming that out now is something that, Facebook didn't do when it decided to change all of its news over to an algorithm or,
But
before
Farhad,
it ran
couldn't you argue they're
Facebook
doing
Live.
that now? I mean, they created this association. They're not trying to own it entirely. They invited other companies in. Zuckerberg's on the Hill now talking about it. There's this period of vetting, arguably. I mean, I might argue, having listened to a whole lot of the congressional questioning this morning, that they hadn't really gotten down to asking the critical questions about Libra that would help to either move this forward, or even if this doesn't move forward, for the lawmakers to know what the rules of the road should be the next time some company or organization comes forth and says, hey, look, digital money, how about it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're doing that. I mean, they're definitely being more collaborative than they have been with other products they've launched in the past. I think they see that they need to be more collaborative, but it's hard still to figure out like how much of a Facebook product this is going to be. I mean, they're going to own the sort of the way to access this kind of standard product, right? Like the technology is a kind of an open thing, but the way you access it through Facebook is going to be like Facebook's thing, and that's like how Google owns Chrome, but not the web. Like it's a distinction, but like in many ways it may fall apart as. It may not fall apart. It may not, function as a real distinction, and may still have like a lot of power for Facebook in running that system, just the way that like Apple has a lot of power in running the App Store, or Google does.
Yeah,
with
John.
Chrome.
It strikes me, John, as the old sort of Google Android strategy of like, oh, Android, it's free, it's only take it, but if you're gonna actually use it, you're going to want some apps. And by the way, we make those. And there are some rules about how you can use those apps. I mean, is that your take, too, on what this is? And if so, what are the dangers around it? Should this ever come to be just with some rules? Or does it need to be, again, banned?
I mean, look, I would take it back even further beyond the Android. I would say that this smacks very much of Standard Oil or U.S. Steel forcing their workers to use company script back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and essentially making people buy their goods from the company store and taking control. This is writ large upon our entire society.
But isn't this way different from that? They're not saying we're going to own Libra. They opened it up. And by the way, you can still transact with a credit card, right?
They're going to own how you get access to it. I don't know that I trust Mark Zuckerberg completely in this notion that this offshore, board is going to somehow be completely independent from Facebook, considering how hard they have fought being broken up and having parts of their company spun out because they've become so large. And I think it's an extraordinarily dangerous thing to do. At one point, those companies wanted to do it back then, and we said no. And I think that as a society, we really need to be careful about putting our trust in someone just because he's not wearing a monocle and he's wearing a really nice cardigan doesn't make him any less dangerous.
Yeah, guys, I would argue that we're getting into that territory with Facebook now, where I feel like we are with China and Huawei, which is that it's like Huawei is a big company, it's a Chinese company, we can't trust China, therefore we can't trust Huawei equipment anywhere in our system. And yeah, you can say that, but it seems to me like it would be safer to say, okay, here are what the rules are going to be. If you want to have equipment in U.S. networks, here's how we can test to make sure it's safe. Here's how we're going to audit over time to make sure it continues to be safe. So we're not just looking at China as the danger, we're able to actually be safe. I feel like with Facebook, everything Facebook says now, it's like, oh, we don't trust Facebook. But what are the rules? Don't there have to be rules? Isn't this a rule of law country?
Yeah.
The whole conversation
but it's extraordinary that you're comparing them to China.
Sorry, I just threw that out there. I'll let Farhad go first on this, and then you, John. Farhad?
I mean, the whole conversation comes down to this question of like, how much power does this company have, and does this one man have? And I just feel like they already have too much power. Like they already have too much power over the digital ads business, over sort of this fundamental way we communicate. The fact that like their kind of policy decisions for what they allow on this network become like a huge democratic question about like how democracies function just indicates how much power they have. Yeah. And then to sort of give them more power over like the money supply, it just seems insane to me. Like, I would just like slow down, like slow your roll, Mark Zuckerberg. Like that's just too much. For one man to control.
Power. How much power should one man have? It too, Farhad. I take your point. A little Shakespeare reference there, Julius Caesar. Yeah. John?
No, I mean, I agree. I think that Mark Zuckerberg has way too much power as it is. I think that even in writing rules, if they were to write rules, the amount of money that Facebook is spending on lobbyists and influence is extraordinary, and that scares me that even if there is an effort to write rules, that they are going to be so deeply embedded in that process that they're never going to be actually fair rules. And I think that at some point, I don't know. I think at some point Mark Zuckerberg should say to himself, all right, I've got enough. I control all this stuff. I've got all this money. Why do I possibly need more? And the drive to continue to consolidate power and money is a scary, scary thing. And
I hear you. Good arguments. I'll close it out by saying the arguments you guys are making about how much money or how much power should one guy have, a lot of other countries make about America, which I think is interesting.
Sure.
Interesting. All right. Time to get those digits. Some numbers that relate to Facebook's specific issues across security, antitrust, and crypto. Let's talk about them. But first, let's get them. First up.
35,000.
35,000. That's how many people Facebook has working on security measures ahead of the upcoming 2020 election. Farhad, Facebook also put out a few days ago a sort of report on some networks, some 50 networks of false accounts that they had broken up, and look what we did, look what we found. Here's the information they were putting out, trying to inflame political situations. 35,000 sounds like a lot. Should we take from this that Facebook is making progress in cleaning up its act, or is it window dressing?
I don't think it's window dressing. I think they are, from what I've seen, they are doing something sort of substantive on foreign disinformation and sort of like the ability of Russia or Iran or someone else to kind of affect political discourse in the United States. I feel like that problem was possibly overblown the whole time, and they've
first underblown, then overblown.
Yeah. I don't think it's true that like Russia used Facebook to elect Donald Trump. I just think that argument is like overblown, and like they've made some progress on it. I think the bigger problem is like domestic misinformation, like rumors started by people in this country for political reasons, just because they're ignorant, like the anti-vax thing. Like that stuff just has a long life on Facebook, and I'm not sure if they have any good ways to police that kind of thing. Just kind of more general rumor, disassociated from like a specific political target.
John, for 35,000, you impressed?
I mean, yeah, I think it's a great number of people to be doing it. I do think, I agree with Farhad that the domestic side of it has been really underappreciated by them. I mean, if you look at like these closed groups, for instance, like the one that all the Border Patrol agents were in that got exposed earlier this year, those are breeding grounds for a lot of this disinformation. And while you have to be part of that group to see that gets into someone's feed, they then start sharing it to other people, either through just their commenting or in conversation with people. And Facebook traditionally doesn't really know what's going on in a lot of these closed groups. And
I haven't
seen a lot of evidence that they're taking that kind of stuff seriously.
I mean, before Facebook,
I mean, sure, it is the internet.
Yeah.
But they've created these tools. They've created ways for people to basically exclude public scrutiny of what they're doing to create incubators for, lies and misinformation or racist propaganda. And then that eventually trickles back out into the larger community. And again, if Facebook has any kind of real commitment to doing this right, then they should be trying to figure that out. And, they are taking steps, but I don't think that there could ever be too many steps, right?
Agreed. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of racist propaganda myself, in case that wasn't clear. All right. Digit number 2.
47.
47. That is the total number of attorneys general who are part of the antitrust probe into Facebook. That includes states and territories. Colorado dropped out. Mississippi dropped out. California's not in. Maybe a couple of others. Guys, this antitrust probe seems to be just an wide open investigation into all kinds of things that Facebook might be doing wrong. Farhad, how big a problem do you think this is for Facebook? Or is it just sort of a fishing expedition where, in the case of a state, if they get some concessions or some jobs or something for Facebook, hey, maybe they'll drop out?
I mean, I think it's a big problem for Facebook. The problem they face is like the kind of political climate around antitrust on the left and the right has changed. Like people, Trump and people in the Justice Department now seem more willing to prosecute various kinds of antitrust. Certainly Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders want to. So I think it's part of a wave that, Google and Facebook should be worried about this. I don't know about the specific 47 attorney, like the state attorney general's case versus like the federal case, but like out of all of these, something is going to happen, and Facebook is just a good sort of target for this. They bought up all of their competitors, or copied them in like very just blatantly in a way that kind of undercut competitors and gave them the whole market for social networking. Like that kind of history, I feel like if there are strong antitrust cops on the beat, like you have in Europe, for example, like they go after that. It's a pretty easy record to go after. So I feel like Facebook should be worried about this here. I mean, Google should also.
John, the ad market seems to me to be the underlying issue here. Targeted advertising. Facebook and Google, over and above all others, just have power here. You experienced that over at BuzzFeed. For a while, BuzzFeed was riding high. Like, look how popular our stuff is. And then not so much, at least when it comes to the money rolling in from that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were getting more and more readers and viewers every month. It wasn't like suddenly people stopped coming to BuzzFeed to read the stories. People were continuing to engage with us. We were having record numbers of views. But what happened was the ad revenue collapsed, and we've been based kind of on these models that Facebook and Google had been kind of promising. But the problem is that when you have two companies that control the ad market sort of end to end, they are able to strip mine people, and that's what they've done to the entire news industry over the last couple of years, and it's had a really, a devastating effect. And I think that is a really big concern, and for me, obviously personally, but I think for us as a country and a society more broadly, and I think that is a big part of why you're seeing everybody kind of start to come together, and that's what the 47 state attorney generals are. Sort of they're the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. The real big problem for them is going to be the DOJ investigation. But the fact that you've got all these different, you got the Louisiana Attorney General and the New York Attorney General on the same page, that is hard to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that this is a big area of concern for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they really are on the same page, or if it's just so, for different reasons, it's popular to be anti-Facebook right now. When it gets down to brass tacks, I wonder if they are actually in this for the same reasons. We'll see. All right, another digit. Give it to us.
25%.
25%. That's about how many of Facebook's partners in Libra have now dropped out of that coalition, leaving a total of 21 left. This is a lot of payments, folks, remaining, Farhad. And I argued on CNBC, I don't think they necessarily dropped out because they think the basic idea of Libra and the currency is bad, but this has become a referendum on Facebook as a brand, and do you trust it? Not so much about the underlying technology.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, if I feel like if Apple had done this, if Apple had created a currency and asked people to join, like everyone would have joined, even if it was exactly the same thing. It's a reflection of kind of Mark Zuckerberg as a political target, Mark Zuckerberg kind of being out there, the guy who's fighting with Elizabeth Warren, the fact that like regulators around the world are extremely skeptical of Facebook, and so if you are a payments company and like are fearing regulators and want to be on their good side, then like joining up with this company like makes you look bad. I think you're right. It's entirely a function of the brand rather than the specific idea of of this currency.
John, what do you think happens if something like Libra goes forward and some countries essentially lose the tool of being able to manipulate their currency in order to rescue their economy? I mean, they can't devalue their currency and get a boost. I mean, is that better because people have the ability, individuals have the ability to maintain their capital, their value, and not see it lost in Zimbabwe or Venezuela like currency drops? Or are we going to see failed states because of this kind of thing?
Yeah, look, I'm not an economist, but I would, just based on the idea of giving Facebook even, sort of a Facebook adjacent thing that Mark Zuckerberg is involved in, that kind of control would scare the hell out of me. And I don't think that and the bottom line is going to be that if you're a corporation and you were looking out for your bottom line, and Zimbabwe is teetering on becoming a failed state, if that doesn't help your bottom line to save Zimbabwe from collapsing economically, you're not going to save them. And that seems like a very problematic thing to have happening in the world, frankly.
Yeah, well, it's a tricky balance, isn't it, between leaving the freedom to innovate, overall freedom of speech, and dealing with companies that have just gotten so big, so powerful that they've lost a lot of trust. I think we did okay at balancing out the issues, despite the Teflon underpants that Mark Zuckerberg has to wear these days, because there is a lot of heat on him. John Farhad, thank you. That's going to do it for Fort Knox.
Thanks so much.
This week. Thanks to both of you. And
Thank you.
folks, we will see you next time.
All right.